Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's show, restraining Pyongyang after the latest rocket launch by the DPRK, we discuss the reactions of the world's leading powers, including China. And into the cosmos, 2015 was a banner year for space exploration, with perhaps even greater discoveries to come in the future. And we start today's show on the Korean Peninsula, where tensions are escalating rapidly. A rocket launch by the DPRK earlier this week set off another spiral of reactions and counter-reaction. The latest reports suggest DPRK is planning to deport all South Korean nationals from Kaesong Industrial Complex, a jointly run factory zone in just north of the demilitarized zone. They've also cut emergency communication lines with South Korea. The move follows Seoul's decision to shut down the industrial park in reaction to DPRK's satellite launch on February the 7th.
The latest moves by the DPRK have sparked a sharp rebuke from South Korea.
The DPRK ignored a warning from the international community and has committed an unacceptable provocation by launching a long-range missile after conducting the fourth nuclear test.
The latest casualty over the spiraling tensions has been Kaesong, a jointly run industrial zone north of the DMZ. Long seen as a symbol of cooperation, its shutdown is yet another setback on the troubled peninsula. The latest round of recriminations was sparked by a controversial rocket launch by Pyongyang. Major powers were united in their condemnation of the DPRK's move last Sunday. While Pyongyang continues to claim it was a satellite launch, it's being widely viewed as a disguised long-range missile test. Japan is among those restoring its sanctions on the DPRK, hoping to deter future launch attempts.
We will not tolerate the DPRK going ahead with the launch after repeated warnings to restrain themselves. The missile launch following the nuclear testing is a clear violation of the UN Security Council resolutions. We will cooperate with the international community and stand firm to take appropriate measures. We will also give our best efforts to protect our people's security and safety.
Washington called on the international community to show Pyongyang that its reckless actions must have serious consequences. Meanwhile, Russia's foreign ministry said the launch would only provoke a decisive protest. It said Pyongyang had once again demonstrated a disregard for norms of international law. The Chinese foreign ministry summoned the DPRK's ambassador on Sunday and expressed regret that the DPRK had insisted on the launch. U.S. intelligence services believe Pyongyang has been expanding its Yongbyon enrichment facility since 2013. And that they could begin to recover plutonium from a restarted nuclear reactor within weeks. If this proves to be true, it could mark a major step up for the DPRK's capabilities, and may point to further escalation in the near future.
And for more on the latest development of actions, reactions, and counter-reactions among DPRK and many other countries regarding the country's nuclear development, we're joined here by Mr. Victor Gao, who is the director of China National Association of International Studies. He's coming to us from New York. In Washington, D.C., we are having Ms. Yu Jung Lim, who is a lecturer of Korea Studies at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. She's originally coming from South Korea. And also joining us from Washington, D.C., we're having Ms. Sharon Squassoni, who is a director of the Proliferation Prevention Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS. First of all, happy Chinese New Year to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us on this holiday season, but this is a really important story we are talking about here. What does it mean, Mr. Lim, since you are originally coming from South Korea? The DPRK's declaration very recently about sending all the South Korean nationals back to South Korea and also seize all the storage in the Kaesong Industrial Zone.
Yes, this is a pretty serious situation. As you know, especially since the May 24 measures, which was another reaction to the Cheonan sinking, South Korea actually has been losing our economic leverage over the North Korea. And the Kaesong was not only just symbolically meaningful, it was almost the only one that we can actually implement our economic leverage over the North Korea. So actually we got the pretty strongest, very strongest card against this time's that provocation. But at the same time, we're very actually sorry about the people or the businessmen there who invested a lot in that industrial complex.
Mr. Gao.
But and plus,
Go ahead, Mr. Lim, Ms. Lim.
Yes, plus and the North Korea's that very unilateral and the prompt reactions. Again, that's another like very serious provocations for us.
Okay.
Yes,
Mr.
the
Gao here in
situation is
Beijing, Mr. Gao joining us from New York. This is very important because South Korea declared it wants to shut down the Kaesong rather industrial zone and move all the South Koreans back home, including the storage. But then DPRK acted very quickly to say, we're going to seize this place and also the storage, and all the South Koreans, you go back home. What do you make of this very fast reactions and counter-reactions between the two Koreas?
Well, I would say the closure of the industrial park is just a chapter in this long story of the nuclearization of DPRK and the recent testing of the so-called hydrogen bomb and the more recent launch of the long-range missile by DPRK. And I would say all these actions by DPRK, including the closure of the industrial zone, add to the tension on the Korean Peninsula, and the stakes are really piling up. And the threat to peace and stability, not only on the Korean Peninsula, but way beyond, is really happening very fast. And I think it's time for the international community to really come up with very resolute reactions to achieve the ultimate goal of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula.
Ms. Squasoni, we've seen so many countries already acted. For example, the United States Congress just passed a bill about how to punish DPRK, anyone who is related to interactions with DPRK, particularly when it comes to facilities and also nuclear development, might be severely punished. Also from South Korea, we just mentioned, also from Japan as well. But the question is, how many cards do we have, or does the international community have on the hand, in the hand, toward DPRK? Will these cards work?
That's such a great question. North Korea is one of the most isolated regimes in the world, and so we've been piling on sanctions for years and years, sanctions and UN Security Council resolutions. It doesn't seem to matter to the North Koreans how many resolutions we pile up on them. I think each country has to use what it, the most favorable levers it has. China, I think, still has a few cards to play. After all, I think it's about 70% of North Korea's external trade is with China. So there are some levers, I think, that can still be pressed, but you have to be really careful because, one potential outcome is collapse of that regime, and that opens up a whole new set of problems.
Mr. Gao, how many cards do you think, rather, China has? Many others say China has many cards, 70% of trade and many other things. What do you think, really?
Well, I would say if we look at the past track record, DPRK seems to have the tendency of playing one country against the other and vice versa. And it thrives in the division it has managed to create. Therefore, whatever economic or financial sanctions that the international community wants to put on DPRK, it will require concerted actions of all the major countries. Because if there is any division, among the major countries, then it will not work. The bite on DPRK will not be that much. And I would say after repeated nuclear weapon testing and the recent long-range missile testing, it is really high time for the international community to get together, to move on to the same page and deal with this increasing menace by DPRK's nuclear weapon program as quickly as possible.
Mr. Gao, you know, the accusation is that many others believe China has not been on the same page with all the others. Is that true?
There are divisions and differences of opinion. From the Chinese perspective, China wants to do whatever that is necessary to achieve the ultimate goal of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, but China does not want to see that the economic sanctions take a bite more on the people in DPRK rather than on whoever who are responsible for the nuclear weapon program in DPRK. But that fine line is very difficult to manage because if there is any loophole in the sanction regime against DPRK, then the regime itself will get away and they will continue to pour resources on the nuclear weapon program, which increases the whole stake on the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, I think it really requires greater wisdom, courage and vision, both on part of China, the United States, and all the other relevant stakeholders to manage to overcome their differences, to see this menace eye to eye so that they can come up with concerted actions. This is no longer a time so we can have the luxury of keeping all the differences while DPRK's nuclear weapon escalates again and again. This is the time to put a full stop to the nuclear weapon menace from DPRK.
Can we put a full stop, though, Mr. Squasoni, and also the wisdom, as Mr. Gao mentioned earlier, about not to leave many loopholes in the sanction regime and in the reactions toward DPRK among all countries involved, so that the reactions that the international community has could eventually work to a certain extent. What do you think are the most critical points here?
Well, I think Mr. Gao made a lot of good points, and unity among the key countries is certainly important. You know, I think back to 2003 when the North Korea pulled out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and there was resounding silence in the UN Security Council, and a lot of that was because China refused to censure North Korea. We're in a totally different situation today, so I think that China has taken a much more active role. You know, when you look at sanctions, what eventually brought Iran to the table, it was related to oil. It was what Iran made its, hard foreign currency from. So we have to take a good long look at North Korea. Where is it getting some of its hard currency? Is this in all of the illegal smuggling, the trade? Can China do better in terms of export control, border interdiction?
Mrs. Squasoni, the question has becoming from ideological, political, to more technical now when it comes to designing the sanction regimes now. As you said, there's more unity than, let's just say, 12 years ago. But how much do we know about the realities on the ground in DPRK among all countries? How much intelligence is being shared? And how much access all the countries have toward DPRK? That when you say we have to make a distinction that we are not punishing the people, but rather punishing the specific acts done related to the country's nuclear weapon development. So how to make sure that balance is done, at least to its utmost extent, to our knowledge? That is the technical question. I think finger pointing is not working anymore. So how much do we know? Let's just say from the U.S. side, how much do we know?
Well, I don't know for sure, but I can tell you that typically in a country where we don't have any diplomatic representation, our options are limited. I think that South Korea probably and China have better insights. Anyone who's been, in and out of Kaesong, may have some insights. You know, we tried really to focus on the elites through all these bans on luxury goods. Some of that helps, right? Some of it helps in terms of Banco Delta Asia, where we restricted money that had been deposited overseas. There are certain of those levers, but you know, when you look at Kaesong, and I think the South Korean contention is that we're going to shut this down because $100 million, you know, that flows through Kaesong is actually going to the nuclear weapons program. It's hard to tell, you know, is that true? How do we prove that? Certainly some of that money can be siphoned off, but it's always a very delicate balance, you know, how much interaction can be helpful and constructive without being siphoned off into the things that we don't want them to do.
Ms. Lim, Mrs. Kwasong keep on mentioning South Korea. How much does South Korea know so that we can make that balance at least better?
Of course, but the South, not only just South Korea, again, I mean, I think that the biggest player in this, again, the sanction designing will be, again, the China. The basic, actually, statistic, actually, I think, backing up my observation, again, you mentioned more than 70%, but some, according to some statistic, more than 90%, actually, of the North Korean trade is between, again, with the China, which means, again, the rest, less than 10% is shared by all the other, including South Korea or including any other country. So without the China's more active involvement or engagement in this sanction designing, of course I can see Chinese concerns too, but probably we need to be all together. Again, we need to be more strategic, and as Mr. Gao mentioned, we need a kind of unity or coherent action.
Mr. Gao, I have to come back to you. This is interesting because everybody is saying, well, probably the others know better about North Korea than us. And eventually the ball is kicked to the China's court. And then China say, our judgment is that we want to keep this balance, not to punish people, but only punish the actions related to nuclear weapons development. But then China made its judgment about what that balance is. And the others say, well, maybe the balance is wrong. But where is that wrong? That the others say, we don't know. Maybe you just stop everything. And China say, this is difficult, we stop everything because we're going to punish everybody. So it seemed that the same kinds of talk, without much real information, we're having, and we're just having empty discussion. I'm not saying this discussion, but rather, what do we, international community, know? How can we make that balance? Mr. Gao, your contribution here.
Thank you. I would say, for the record, China has been doing the right thing as far as achieving the ultimate goal of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is concerned. However, whether for the good thing that China and the right thing that the China has been doing, whether that is sufficient to achieve the ultimate goal, that's another question. I think the circumstances on the ground in DPRK are so complicated that the good intentions that China has brought onto the table have been betrayed again and again, and China has been let down in all its good offices, good attempts, etc. Therefore, I think sanctions are one thing, but whether sanctions, even with unity among all the major powers, will be sufficient to achieve the ultimate goal of denuclearization, that's another question that we need to think about. Maybe something more than economic sanctions. And you are right, you know, it would involve, you know, the quality and the amount of the intelligence on the ground in DPRK, but I think it is time for the international community to decide that we can no longer wait. The urgency of the crisis in DPRK in terms of its possessing the nuclear weapons constituting such a threat to all the neighboring countries is real, and any further delay, procrastination on the part of the international community will let the whole international community down. And countries like China itself will become a victim of the nuclear weapon program. Therefore, it's time for real action. But in order to get the actions done, we need to achieve the ultimate level of unity. And in this sense, I think the United States really need to think twice as to how to incentivize everyone to take the right course of action in dealing with the nuclear weapon program in DPRK.
We are seeing the question is being kicked back to the courts of the United States once again. I'm sure that discussion can go on and will go on, not only here, but also among countries and governments. And there are many other important questions. As many of you know, what is the latest stage of development of nuclear weapons inside DPRK, and also whether sanctions is the only option. There are so many questions related to this. We're running out of time, though, for this discussion, but I want to express our appreciation for the three of you once again on this holiday season for joining us. Happy New Year to all of you. Victor Gao, Eugene Lim, and also Sharon Squassoni. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Stay with us here on World Inside. We got more to come, including to the infinity and beyond after major year of space exploration. We discuss what exciting new milestones might be coming up in the near future. Welcome back. 2015 saw major breakthroughs in space travel and exploration amid unprecedented interest in the cosmos. In all of human history, only 552 people have ever traveled beyond Earth's atmosphere and into space. We have now the privilege of speaking to one of them today. Dr. Sandra Magnus is a NASA astronaut with over 157 days of experience in space. After leaving NASA Astronaut Corps, she became Executive Director of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. Dr. Magnus, welcome to World Insight.
Thank you for the invitation.
Wow, 157 days in the outer space. What is it like for you?
You know, it was really spectacular to be able to stay there for so long. When you visit on a short-term mission, you get a taste of space, but when you live there, you actually establish a lifestyle there, and it was really a spectacular place to live and work. And of course, you had a lovely view every day just out the window where you could see the Earth go by.
Lifestyle, what is the most important part of that lifestyle for you? Even today, you could reflect upon it.
You know, I think it was really spectacular to be on the space station and do so much science and advanced knowledge and breaking through technology boundaries, but also it was just magical to live in microgravity and be free of gravity and be able to float around and work in that environment. It was just a really, really special experience.
I wonder, you know, more than 157 days in the outer space, that changed also the way you think, because it seems that everything around you has been different. There's no gravity anymore. You have to work very closely with one or two individuals instead of facing a whole Earth of population. And everything has changed. So does that also change the way you think from time to time?
Oh, of course. I think all of my experiences as an astronaut shaped me in ways I didn't anticipate. I've been able to work internationally with all of our international partners, and that's been very special. And then being outside the planet and being able to look down on the Earth, you get a different appreciation of the Earth. You see the Earth as our spaceship, and you can easily tell that we're all connected here on this planet, even though it's not obvious. And so you have a different appreciation of the world and of how we all fit together.
Now, these days, so many people are looking forward to the outer space travel. If there's anything you can offer as advice, as someone who has stayed in the outer space for more than 157 days, tell them what is the best thing to prepare for and what is the most important once they go out there.
Well, I think first of all, if you have an opportunity to travel beyond our Earth's atmosphere, you should definitely do it. It is a magical thing to see our planet, to see how beautiful it is, to see how fragile it looks, and to see how it's all connected. And to prepare for it, I think is really just you have to keep an open mind and an adventurous spirit.
And finally, before we go, as a female
astronaut. This is becoming extremely interesting and challenging. Anything special about that part of the experience?
No, I think, you know, when you get to the point where you're qualified to be an astronaut, it's really most importantly that you, whether you're a male or a female, is that your colleagues trust you to do the right thing. They trust your judgment because you are in an environment that is very challenging. And so I've always tried to work well with my teams. I've always tried to make sure people knew they could rely on me to do my job, to make sound judgments, to act decisively. And I think that's really the most important key when you have a job like astronaut or other jobs that are very critical and in environments that can be dangerous.
Dr. Sandra Magnus, who traveled in the outer space for more than 157 days. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Really, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You're very
Before we
welcome.
go to our studio discussion, let's take a look back at the major achievements in the past year of space exploration. Our story starts on Mars, the red planet. Take a look.
They say that once you grow crops somewhere, you've officially colonized it. So, technically, I colonized Mars.
It's just a Hollywood blockbuster. But a landing on the face of Mars is closer than ever to becoming a reality. 46 years after landing on the Moon, manned exploration of the Mars surface has continued to elude us. But NASA's announcement that the red planet may contain water has opened up a world of possibilities.
These observations from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter are giving us a much better view that Mars has resources that are useful to future travelers. When you have water, you know, what's water? Hydrogen and oxygen. That's what we make rocket fuel out of. Perchlorates. The space shuttle, the solid rocket boosters are aluminum perchlorate. In principle, you could make solid rocket fuel. And as we've talked about, perchlorates are ubiquitous around Mars.
The advance of space technology in the private sector has also seen major breakthroughs. Private space firm SpaceX successfully completed the first ever vertical landing of one of their rockets. That means rockets could become reusable, slashing the overall cost of space travel. And as Mars appears almost within humanity's reach, we've expanded our gaze to the very edge of the solar system. NASA's New Horizons probe reached Pluto after a decade of travel. In March, NASA's Dawn mission visited Ceres, an icy world in the asteroid belt. And in July, NASA's Kepler Space Telescope spotted the most Earth-like world found to date, Kepler 452b. 2015 also marked the 25th anniversary of NASA's Hubble Space Telescope. The Hubble technology has done much to capture the public imagination over the years, with its incredible pictures of distant astronomical phenomena and of worlds within our own solar system. And the search continues to understand more about the unknown elements of the universe. China launched its first ever dark matter particle explorer satellite, dubbed Wukong after the Monkey King character from the Chinese classic Journey to the West. All those discoveries and breakthroughs, accompanied by a flurry of blockbuster sci-fi movies, has made 2015 a breakthrough year in terms of public interest in space exploration. That's been good news for companies looking to put the common person into orbit. Space tourism firms like Virgin Galactic and Xcore Aerospace are hoping to make recreational trips into the cosmos accessible to everyone. It's been called the final frontier, and with major progress on many major fronts, it looks like exploration of the great beyond is entering an exciting new phase.
And for more on that, we are joined here in the Beijing studio, Professor Yang Yuguang from the China Aerospace Science and Industry Cooperation. He's also a member of the International Astronautical Federation Space Transportation Committee. Meanwhile, in Huntsville, Alabama, in the United States, we are having Dr. John Horak, who is the manager of the Science and Mission Systems Office at the NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. Well, there are so many news related to space travel these days. What do you consider, Mr. Horak, as the most exciting news that happened in the year 2015? What are we looking at for the new year?
Well, in 2015, I think there were some very exciting activities that occurred. We, human beings, for the first time, sent a machine to investigate Pluto, and the Pluto flyby was tremendous. the ability to study up close a comet with the Rosetta spacecraft and the Philae lander. That was fantastic solar system science. Water was discovered, very salty water flowing on Mars was tremendously exciting. And then of course in the engineering side, we're now seeing the ability to launch and land rockets. Both the Blue Origin as well as SpaceX have demonstrated the ability to launch a first stage and then land that rocket back at or near the launch site intact. Those are very, very exciting things, and I think we'll see more to come in 2016.
What about you, Mr. Yang?
I agree with John, but last year is a relatively quiet year for manned space flight. But for the deep space missions, the human beings have many progress. Like John have mentioned, the exploration of Pluto and also the Rosetta and the Philae missions. Those missions are so exciting and give us more knowledge than expected.
Interesting. Not only that, we have also seen a lot of movies, sci-fi novels coming out regarding humans' exploration of the outer space. Many wonder, what would these kind of enthusiasm created by these cultural products eventually contributing to the discovery and the cultivating of future talents in outer space exploration? Mr. Yang, briefly from you.
I should say science fiction is more important maybe than people and commonly understand. For instance, like many employees in space field like me are choosing this career because of the science fictions, either the novels or the movies. I can still remember when I first see the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a manned visit to Jupiter. So these kind of movies also brings more knowledge to common people about the space. So I think science fiction plays a very important role to let the public know about space and be more enthusiasm to the space.
If that is the case, Dr. Horak, I would assume you have seen Martian and interstellar movies like this. What do you make of them? Are they as real as a space expert like you would like to say?
I think that in general, the movie and entertainment community does a very good job of trying to make movies as realistic as possible. Now we have to remember they're movies, so they're not science, they're movies, and so it's okay that they're not perfect. I think when you see a book or when you see a movie or you see a television program about space and it's popular because there's something that is common to every one of us, whether you live in Beijing or in Brooklyn. It's this common heritage of the night sky. We've all looked up and seen the stars. Whether you were Christopher Columbus or Zheng He, you used the same stars to navigate across the oceans. There's something about being a human being and looking up. And so when we see this in our art and in our culture and in our entertainment, it's like music. It's like beautiful poetry. It's space. It's something that is really important to us just because we're human beings.
Well, outer space is enormous. There are so many places that we can explore. Priority is the thing. Mr. Horak, what do you think about the priorities that we have seen back in the year 2015? And how should we streamline those priorities for the future? After all, resources are still limited.
So I think there are several places in the solar system that we need to go explore, both with people and with robots. We'll go with robotics first and people later. Basically, I would say follow the water. And so we know now that there is water on Europa and Enceladus and organic molecules on Titan and water flowing on Mars. So those are the 4 places I think we need to look. And for me, the moon is very important because it's a place where we can go learn how to explore with people. We have tremendous engineering challenges, radiation challenges, long-duration spaceflight challenges. Can the body hold up on a long voyage to Mars? Those are things I think we can learn on and around the moon first before we go with people, for example, to Mars or to take material out of a geyser coming out of Enceladus, a moon of Saturn.
Mr. Yang, agree with following the water?
I agree. Water is a very critical resource, not even only for the human being itself, but also for the spacecrafts. It's a very ideal propellant to make hydrogen from the water. So finding water is the first step to explore or exploitation of the solar system.
Of course, moon exploration is something China has been working on for quite some time. Which stage are we?
Well, next year or maybe the year after next, we will have the Chang'e 5 mission, which will be the sample return mission from the moon. And after that, we will have a soft landing mission on the far side of the moon. As John have mentioned, that the water is important. And you see, on the far side of the moon, mainly in the polar areas, there may be some large amount of water there.
Mr. Horak, of course, moon landing has already been in the history of American outer space exploration. China, though, has only started to look at that goal. What are some of the important things that do you think you are observing from the U.S. Of China's moon mission, or Chang'e mission, as Chinese put it?
So the first thing I would say is that the Chinese space program is extremely impressive, and you are to be congratulated on the work that has been done and the work that you are planning to do. It's nothing short of exceptional. Number two, I think that it's very important, and I'm speaking personally, I would like to see us collaborate in a more strong sense and a more deep collaboration, so that we can go to the moon together. While I was driving up to see my parents over the weekend, the full moon was setting in the morning and it was rising over China. You could see it and I could see it. It's something that we both treasure and I think can both utilize. And so, for example, the director of the European Space Agency has proposed we put together a global program to go to the moon together as people from Earth. And put all of our flags there. And that's something I would welcome. And I would like to work forward and see if that's something that we could do.
Go to the moon together. That sounds really romantic. Mr. Yang, what do you make of that suggestion put forward by the European side? Will the three sides, for example, China, European space exploration, and also the United States, be able to do that?
I believe it will be the main trend of the future space activities in the future. You see, human explorations, I mean the human spaceflight need a lot of money. So in the future, maybe the situation in the Cold War will...
Money and talent?
Yes.
Resources,
in the future, the situation in the Cold War will never happen again. So, but the human being needs space, and even more important, to need the manned space flight, either to the moon or to the Mars. So to solve this problem, I think cooperation together, either China or Europe or America, should work together. The Americans have announced their proposal to go to the Mars. But the first step, go to the moon, will be a very good step for the future Mars missions. And Mr. Buzz Aldrin also gave his proposal that in the future, maybe the Mars spaceship can use the future China's space station to accelerate its construction.
Not only going to the moon together, which I said is extremely romantic, Mr. Horak, what about doing other things in the outer space together as well? For example, using the space station and many other options. Of course, I'm coming from an outside perspective, looking at some of the critical issues. So how much space really is there for international cooperation, Mr. Horak? Now the Cold War has already ended for decades.
Well, I think it's extremely important that we collaborate internationally, and you know, I would remind the audience that as early as 1962 or 1963, prior to his death, President Kennedy was suggesting that perhaps the U.S. and the Soviet Union should go to the moon together. In 1975, at the height of the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union flew the Apollo-Soyuz mission. And so space can be a very important leader, a leading indicator, and a laboratory in which we can learn to work together. We breathe the same air, We drink the same water. We live on the same planet. And Sandy probably, if you had spoke to Sandy Magnus earlier, she could have described the thin layer of atmosphere, just as thin as an eggshell. We all have to take care of the place. We all have to figure out how to get along, and I think it's important that we learn about our solar system and our universe, and we explore that together to bring those benefits back to the people who live on Earth, as I said, whether you live in Beijing or in Brooklyn or in Berlin.
Before the governments are working together, individuals are already working together. If you look at the commercial outer space exploration business, you can certainly see individuals are very enthusiastic about looking at the outer space and what it brings to us. Mr. Yang, what about that trend in China? How many Chinese are enthusiastic about it? What about the cooperation between the Chinese side and the international community regarding that possibility?
First, I think for the either for the space tourism, for the international cooperation, it is a dream of all human beings. Both John and I belong to the IAF community. I think our community should play a very leading role and a very important role in promoting the international cooperation. And also, with individuals and private sectors taking part in these kind of activities, the cost will be greatly reduced, I think, in the future. There is successful examples such as civil aviation. I think without the attendance of the private sectors, the cost of the civil aviation cannot be so low as the current situation.
Mr. Horak, your views on this outer space exploration by individuals, how much would that mean? What would that mean for the real deal?
I think that it's extremely important, and Dr. Yang spoke about our relationship through the International Astronautical Federation. Successful collaboration requires knowledge, it requires trust, and it requires reliability. And so those are things that are built at the human level. I work very well with Dr. Yang because I know him, I trust him, he is my friend. And we need to build those kinds of relationships and those kinds of bridges across individuals and across cultures, so that the governments that represent the people can also work in those kinds of ways to help make the world a better place.
Both you, Mr. Horak and Mr. Yang, you are the experts in the fields of outer space exploration. If I could ask you, because we're talking to you at the time of the Spring Festival, which is the Chinese Lunar New Year. It's the start of a new year in China. So if there is one big question you really want to understand about the outer space, what would that be? Let me go to you first, Mr. Horak. Your question.
Very simple. Are we alone? Is this the only place where there's life? Or is there life somewhere else?
Very profound question. What about you, Mr. Yang?
Unfortunately, I don't have new questions. I have the same question as John.
That's why you're colleagues, right, in the IAF. But for now, we want to thank the input from both of you. And those are wonderful questions. We hope with your hard work and further exploration of the outer space, we're going to find out the answer to that ultimate question. Thank you so much, Professor Yang Yuguang, Dr. John Horak. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You'll be able to find us. Or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.